All right, here we go. Good morning, everyone. Josh Kavenko here, Chief Marketing Officer at Vecna Robotics. I'm joined by my good pal, Anthony Michella. Anthony, how you doing?
Doing great today. How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing great. Joining you here from lovely Austin, Texas. A little overcast day, which is never bad, getting a lot of rain, so everything looks green here. I believe you're joining me somewhere in some bat cave in a secret, undisclosed location.
Coming at you live from Vecna headquarters here in New York City.
Wow. Well, Vecna head. We're everywhere.
We're everywhere.
Austin, Waltham,
New York.
Charlotte. We've got New York. We've got Chicago up where Jeff is. I mean,
We're taking over, man. Taking over.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Well, talk about taking over. It has been a turbulent time, just a positively turbulent time for us, like a whirlwind for the last 8 weeks. I thought I'd check in with you just to get a temperature check, maybe get you to read the tea leaves a little bit for us, interpret what you've seen, what you've heard. So let me run through it. We had a press release with Geodis with some work that you've been and your team has been directly involved in. We had ProMat. We've got a ton of customer activity, positive customer activity. We've got an event coming up next month. So I thought we'd just sort of set the table here and get your interpretation of things for everybody out there, and we'll see how it goes.
Happy to.
So let's start with ProMat. I mean, 50,000 people at McCormick. I was overwhelmed with that event. Tons of preparation going into it. Amazing things that I saw across the market. Just wanted to get your thoughts and on what you saw there and what you know.
ProMat was an amazing show for us. It was just an amazing show in general. The energy in this industry it's really, really exciting. I think it's really useful to think about how ProMat and Modex have kind of evolved over the years. These are shows that were traditionally focused on material handling and warehousing. And in the last 3, 4, 5 years, they've become increasingly, and now to the point they're pretty much entirely focused on automation and robotics. And in my view, they are kind of the premier events for automation in the warehousing space. And to be perfectly honest, they can be a little bit overwhelming, right? The volume of types of solutions. If I were a customer coming into a show like ProMat, I think it could be very confusing for me to see the different types of solutions from different providers, the different approaches to some of these solutions. I think the industry is still kind of struggling to find the right narrative thread for how we talk about this stuff and how we can start to look at what the right solutions are going to be for different types of customers. Another thing that's worth thinking about for shows like this is definitely trying to separate the hype from the reality. We saw a lot of pretty exotic things this year. We saw humanoid robots being demonstrated for warehouse workflows for the first time. We saw a bunch of pretty exotic truck unloading solutions, very high complexity, large scale machinery. We saw some new AI approaches in the warehouse, and we saw a ton of vendors, global vendors, right? New vendors that we've never heard of before, making debuts at this show. And I think it's really important to think about like which of these technologies actually make sense and are ready for prime time today, and what stuff is still going to require a couple of years to bake.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's sort of a common theme that I took away. I mean, MHI did an amazing job, so this is not an indictment on them whatsoever. But like this show was a hodgepodge. You had everything from humanoid robots to hoists, and everything in between. I mean, you were presenting, and we'll get to the topic of your presentation in a moment. About the future, and sort of this big vision for the future of automation in the warehouse, right next to a massive booth with hoists and all this sort of more traditional equipment, which I think that sort of summed it up, right? It's really hard to put your finger on exactly where this market needs to go. And Mo, by the way, it was the same thing at National Retail Federation, right? Back in January, completely different market. I would argue that this is a lot more mature in terms of automation and technology,
Definitely.
in terms of what we're doing, moving material. But it was the same hodgepodge. You had everybody everywhere. I think these industries are learning where do these pieces fit, right? How do you organize the thinking there? And I think how we're organized is really very much how the customers are thinking about it. They're struggling.
Right. And I think it's really interesting to see how customers are going to adapt to this stuff over time. I think I hate to be in a world where it's the customers are going with whatever salesman got to them first, right? Rather than actually evaluating the breadth of the solutions and actually thinking about the solutions for what the workflows are like in their facilities, right? For some customers, really infrastructure heavy ASRS is absolutely the right solution. For other customers, something more flexible like an AMR or an AGV solution is the right thing for their facility. And I want to make sure, I hope that the customers take away from a show like this that there really is a breadth of options, and are start to develop the sophistication to examine those options relative to each other, even if they're very, very different solutions. If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
And the stakes are high, right? Let's make no mistake about it. There's a lot of the trepidation that we see, the fear. This theme for Vecna for this year is like how we help you and support you through the fear of change and all that stuff. But let's sort of narrow in on the message that you delivered, and as a company, we supported you there. This idea of workflow over robots. I mean, it's sort of it's a buzzy way to put it, right? What did you? So you had a presentation there. We've had some content on it. What did you mean by workflow over robots, and how did it juxtapose or align to the larger messages that you were seeing at the show?
So if you talk to the customers, I think the industry broadly is starting to recognize that the move to automation is not just necessary, but it's sort of inevitable, right? And this is coming from a place of from the labor shortage perspective, but also just from the need to continue to accelerate the material movements to keep up with demand, right? E-commerce is growing 15-20% a year. The number of shipments is increasing. Commerce is moving, and we are not able to. There's no scenario where we continue to meet this demand with just increased human labor, right? So we need to move towards, at a macro level, at an industry level, towards higher efficiencies. And you know, if you talk to the customers, they're not. They want to invest in automation, but they're also continuing to invest in their people. And I have the absolute conviction that the right solutions are solutions that are a mix of human labor plus autonomy plus robotics. And I think there's this moment here where we have to examine the workflows in a holistic way at a systems level and identify where we should best utilize human labor in a way that creates meaningful jobs where you can have real retention and real growth for employees, and juxtapose that with using automation to as a tool, right? As a tool to let these human operators do their jobs better, have more satisfying jobs, have safer jobs, and ultimately create better outcomes for both the employees and the warehouse owners, warehouse operators.
Right, and you were joined by our friends at Geodis with this presentation, and we had a press release about this. That's their vision too, right? It's
100%. If you talk to the Geodis guys, they are absolutely focused on their employees, right, and creating better outcomes for their employees. It's baked into the DNA of the culture at Geodis, and I think working with them on the platforms that we've been developing together are showing ways that robotics can both improve the throughput, improve the efficiency of material in the facilities, as well as improve the lives and the outcomes of the operators on the warehouse floor.
right. And not to dive too deep there, but we're not talking about marginal gains here. We're talking about fundamental productivity improvements, right? Like upwards of 80% productivity improvements.
It's going to be transformative, right? Transformative in terms of throughput, transformative in terms of quality. I think that the change, the delta here is going to be so massive that it's not going to be able to be ignored, right?
Right.
I mean, you've seen this kind of happening slowly the last 2 or 3 years in the each picking or unit picking space, and as you kind of move up the value chain, I think you're just going to see more and more of it. It's like, how can we leverage autonomy to make this system more efficient? And eventually, I think it will even trickle up all the way up to trucking and shipping, right, at a macro scale. Like, we can use autonomy to make every one of these operations more efficient.
But I love how you don't say robot. We love robots. I mean, geez, I've got all these trinkets around my house. I've got these little Piperoid robots from Japan. These little,
I mean, there's certainly a childhood joy in talking about robots, right?
right.
So,
We all love it. We work for a robotics company, but the reality is, you said system. So this is not about going into a catalog and choosing the bot to go do that thing. It's about workflows. It's about thinking about workflows. This is what Geodis has done beautifully, is really rethink a full system and work with their people and the automation to really optimize and improve an entire workflow. Maybe not completely end to end, but like big chunks of it.
I think the most important thing that I hope customers can take away from the show and maybe from this conversation is if you're going into an automation project with the idea of taking a human operation and doing a one-for-one replacement with a robotic operation, you're taking the wrong approach, right? Of course, there are ways to find value there, and certain things can be automated in that kind of one-for-one sort of replacement ideology. But I think that's actually the wrong approach fundamentally. And if you
Right.
can zoom out a little bit and look at you know, look at your facility or look at the system level, say, hey, maybe this aspect of what a human does makes more sense to be done by a robot, and now I've got freed up this bandwidth for the human associate to do new tasks or do higher value tasks or handle exceptions or handle edge cases. And this is why I'm not really a believer in this notion of the lights out warehouse, right? I think there's always going to be edge cases in this world. It's the same reason we haven't been able to. The self-driving car industry struggled in the same way, right?
Mhm.
The technology is mature, but the edge cases and the consequences of the edge cases are quite extreme. And I think if you look at things like advanced driver assist or advanced cruise control, some of these things can actually build at a system level, create a human plus autonomous agent working together to create a better outcome, right? Rather than focusing on trying to fully replace the human.
Right. Right. The Jetsons universe hasn't happened yet. I don't know what year they were forecasting all that Jetsons.
And
Hasn't happened yet.
I'm not sure that's the world we want to build. I'm not sure that's a better world.
I'm not sure either. But I think we're running short of time here. But this is a great segue to conclude with thinking about systems being thoughtful, strategic. That's where our friends at Gartner come in. And we have the Gartner Supply Chain Expo coming up next month. And we have a booth there. We've got 4 folks going. I'm going to be there. You're going to be there, Anthony. Matt Charuka and Jeff Huerta are going to be there. We have a presence. We have a speaking engagement. You're going to be talking about and continuing this narrative around workflows over robots. Maybe a little bit of a different audience. What's going to be your take there? Well, give me a little bit of a glimpse as to what you're going to be talking about there.
This is an event largely attended by executives, COOs, chief supply chain officers, people who are kind of operating at that higher level, right? And my hope is that the executives there can maybe share some of this vision or take away from this the idea that humans and robots together are the right path to getting automation in the near term, and that maybe we should be thinking about this at a macro view of how we revalue labor almost globally, right? Like I think there are some very heavy questions here about what does this look like 10 or 15 years from now when autonomy has shown improvements 20, 30, 50, 80% efficiency gains at these facilities, and how do we use this to create both meaningful work for everyone at these facilities, and also create these outcomes that are shared. Positive outcomes are shared between the factory owners, the workers, and the customers, right?
Right.
So
I think the way I look at it, business school guy thinking is like this is not a procurement decision, right? This is a order of magnitude operational change decision. It's a human resources decision. It's a financial decision, and there's a lot of stakeholders that need to be involved when you get to scale, right? You can start a project out in a facility, no problem. We have customers that do it all the time, but in order to really get it to scale and maybe exit the Gartner trough of disillusionment, right? Which is where this sort of the realm of where we are right now in the Gartner speak.
Yes,
I think it needs to include those constituents, right?
I mean, if we're talking very credibly about 80, 90, 100% performance improvements with some of these workflows, right? Like this is something that hasn't happened in the world since maybe the steam engine. I mean, I think that's not an overstatement. It's that kind of comparison. And so as a group, as a leadership group, we need to really start to imagine what these impacts are going to be and really drive them towards something that's world positive rather than something that's a little bit, could be more dystopian. And I think the opportunity here is potentially huge to meaningfully improve the world, right? I really do believe that autonomy can build a better world where we live better, where humans have better work, and everyone gains, and the gains will be truly massive.
You heard it from the man himself at Gartner. You're going to hear him talk about how Vecna Robotics is going to save the world on May 10th. Join us the whole week. We're going to be there. We're here all week, gang. So, Anthony, it's great to talk with you.
Always great to talk to you, Josh.
Look forward to working with you at Gartner and then beyond. And then, looking forward to hearing more about this narrative in the weeks and months to come. So with that, everybody, signing off from LinkedIn Live. And also beyond Gartner, we've got a next episode of Mythbusters coming up on Cinco de Mayo. So watch this channel for a preview of that coming up soon. Later.